Income inequality gets all the headlines, so I'm not going to worry about motivating too much. But let me give you a little bit of background. The three earlier presenters did most of the hard work, so we're going to focus on 10 rich countries. We're going to use the list cross-national data center and some data from OECD, whatever kind of fits our needs or what best is better for us. And then as Janet talked about, we're going to use two different measures of income. Market income, so this is going to be primarily wages and earnings, and if you're self-employed earnings, but it's also going to include interest, dividends, rents. And then we're going to, before there's any explicit government involvement, then we're going to compare inequality, what happens when there is explicit government involvement, with disposable personal income. So disposable personal income is going to subtract out taxes, is going to add in tax credits. In the US, it's the earned income tax primarily. And then we're going to add in cash and near cash transfers, so Social Security, unemployment, and then food stamps. As Janet said, what we're going to miss, though, is we're going to miss the in-kind transfers. So we're going to miss, importantly, health care. We're going to miss housing subsidies, and we're going to miss education. And as those differences are going to be magnified, what we're going to compare when we compare the US to other countries, to these other 10 countries. And I'm only going to show market income once. The rest of the slides, and that's going to be my first slide, the rest are going to be with disposable personal income. But I want to show the difference between the US and the market income versus disposable personal income. And we'll use two measures of inequality. The thing you should really get is that higher numbers means higher inequality. And most of the time we're going to use the Gini coefficient, but I'll also show the 90-10 ratio and explain what that is. But again, higher numbers means higher inequality, so the Gini coefficient goes from 0 to 1, 0, complete equality, 1, complete inequality. So let's talk, and all the slides are going to follow this basic pattern where I'm going to show just some bar charts, each of our 10 countries, and we're showing market income inequality of the 10 countries, and this bright, thick red line across the top is going to be right around the US level. So if another country is above it, then it has higher inequality, below, lower inequality. So let's start with this market income inequality before any explicit government involvement in redistributing resources. So we see Ireland has the highest level of market income inequality, and the US is at about the same level as four other countries, Germany, France, Italy, and the UK. So the US, in terms of market income inequality, is not an outlier. It lies within, below Ireland and within the range of four other countries. Now it's below the two Nordic countries and Australia and Canada, but market income inequality, the US is not an outlier. It's in line with other countries that we see ourselves as comparable to. It's when we get to disposable income inequality where the pattern changes. And so now we're going to add in the gray bars, again, still are market income inequality, but now the black bar shows you the level of disposable income inequality when we take into account explicit government transfers. So we're subtracting out taxes, adding in tax credits, adding in cash transfers. And now the US is the world leader in income inequality, in disposable income inequality. So a country like Ireland has higher market income inequality. The market itself redistributes more to high income, but has considerably less disposable income inequality. So its government is doing more to redistribute resources, either through taxes and through transfers. While the US, again, was comparable to four other countries, France, Germany, UK, and Italy, and now we have higher disposable income inequality because our government is doing less to transfer resources. And so really what I want you to get from these first two slides is it's not the market necessarily that is unusual. It's that our country is redistributing resources less than in other countries. So it is not the market, it is the government that is redistributing less than in these other rich countries. Now, one potential criticism, the Gini coefficient is a relative measure of inequality. It doesn't take into account that we have the highest GDP, or GDP, second highest GDP per capita behind Norway. So we are just a richer country. So maybe we have higher inequality just because we're richer. That's also why we didn't compare the US to middle-income countries or developing countries. We're just richer, and so maybe we just have, in this case, maybe we're just gonna have higher inequality because we're a richer country. Our poor are not worse off. Maybe our poor are actually better off. And so that's where we're gonna use the 90-10 ratio. So I'm gonna walk through the 90-10 ratio, has 3 steps, and I'm gonna essentially go backwards. I'm going to give you the 90-10 ratio. So it's the ratio of income of a representative high-income household, which is at the 90th percentile. So that household earns more income than 90% of the other households in the country. And we're going to divide it by the 10th percentile. So the household at the 10th percentile, that's a representative low-income country. They earn more income than only 10% of the population. We're going to take that ratio first, and that's what I'm going to show you here. And again, we're using disposable income. So we get the same picture. The US is the world leader in inequality, has the highest level of inequality. And this tells us that high-income people, the 90th percentile, earn 6 times as much income than people at the 10th percentile. And so there's a huge difference between the 90 and 10 in the US. And it's much smaller in these other countries. The next highest country, Australia and Canada, they're right around 4. So there's a significant gap. Their high-income people earn 4 times as much. Our high-income people earn 6 times as much. And we get to the 2 Nordic countries, and the ratio is down to 3. It's half of what it is in the US. So now we're going to unpack it between, well, how much of that is because our rich are richer, and how much of it is people at the bottom as well, and see if our poor, are they actually better off than poor in these other countries. So we're going to start with these X's. These X's say the level of income at the 90th percentile. One thing you're going to say, well, obviously our 90th percentile, it's in tens of thousands of dollars, so that's around 65,000. Obviously, that is an equivalized value. So we're essentially dividing it by the square root of family size. So we're taking into account how many people actually live in the household. So that's why it's at 65,000. But again, what we see is the rich in the US are richer than in the other countries. The X is higher than in all the other countries. So it is true, our high income people have higher income than in other countries. Now we want to look at the other end. Are our poor actually better off, or are they about the same? And so then we add these circles at the bottom. This is the level of income at the 10th percentile. And so again, the red bar says, that's the US level. And there's only one country that has poor who are worse off than in the US, again, among these 10 countries, and that's Italy. The rest are right around the same. They're right around, around $10,000, and again, equivalent, taking into account family size. And in Norway, it's actually significantly higher. So we can't say that we don't necessarily care about inequality. It's because our poor are better off. Our poor are not better off than in these other countries. And so what we get is U.S. is a high inequality country, and it's really because we've got high income households. We're bigger at the top end. It's not that our poor are somehow better off than in these other countries. Lastly, we want to look a little bit at trends and to see, is the U.S. always higher than these other high-income countries? Are we always have higher inequality? And just to look at trends. Now, I'm going to show you some lines. I didn't try to fit all 10 lines onto it. I tried at the beginning, but you wouldn't have been able to see anything. So I've kind of done a few representative countries. So we see the Gini coefficient in disposable income inequality for the U.S. from about 1979 through 2010, the latest data we have through LIST. And the US has the highest level of inequality in every year, except we see at that first year, right around 1979, 1980, where France actually had higher disposable income inequality than the United States. But we see they took very different paths after 1980. US inequality increased by 18%, French inequality decreased by 11%. And so what I want you to take is 2 things from this is U.S. has increasing inequality and higher than all these other countries, but also increasing inequality isn't a fact of life. It's not something we have to accept. France has had decreasing inequality. So it's not as if there's some sort of natural law or no matter what over the last 30 years in these rich countries, inequality has to have been going up. It went down in France, and I was also not shown in this figure, but in the paper, Ireland has a decrease in inequality. We also see Sweden had the largest increase in inequality, but it also had a period of decreasing inequality. So inequality increasing is not a fact of life. So a few conclusions, and there's going to be a bonus slide next, but let me hit these first conclusions here. The US has about the same level of market income inequality as these other rich countries, but it's when we restrict it to disposable income, when we have explicit government involvement where the US has more inequality. So the US does significantly to transfer income than these other rich countries. Then, some countries have experienced periods of falling inequality. So it's not a fact of life that inequality is going up. Inequality could go down with more explicit government involvement. So we'll say that US has made either an explicit or at least an implicit choice to allow increasing inequality, either by not altering its labor market institutions or by not redistributing more toward low-income households. So, one analogy people often make is, well, over the last 30 years, there have been winners from, technological change and increasing inequality, and then there have been losers. It's not a great term, but then, or a great term, but there have been winners and losers. The people who have done better, the winners, have had increasing returns to skill, so it's the high-skilled people. The losers are people who are in manufacturing or who are in low-skilled jobs. And in the U.S., the winners have not compensated the losers. So maybe we had some sort of implicit agreement of when you're poor, if the economy's hurting you, you transfer. But we've essentially broken that compact. The winners are not compensating the losers in the United States, but they seem to be doing that more in other countries. So the bonus slide, it will act a little bit as a transition to Gabriel's presentation on wealth inequality. Is work Tim and I do, as David said, has looked at income inequality, wealth inequality, and consumption inequality. Economic inequality, as we're learning today, is multidimensional. You can't just look at income inequality by itself. There are many dimensions. And so we really wanted to show one quick slide on income and wealth inequality together. So we see, the U.S. again is at the far right, has the highest income inequality, like I've showed already, but now the X's represent wealth inequality. And so it's the share of wealth held by the top 10%. And we see a much higher share in the U.S. So income inequality and wealth inequality is unequal in the United States. It's not just one factor. We need to look at all of these factors. So the U.S. is the reigning world champion in something you don't want to be the champion in. We're the reigning world champion in inequality, at least among these rich nations. But income is only part of the picture. Gabriel's going to tell you more about wealth inequality and the safety net and all of these other factors. And if hopefully eventually we'll have cross-national comparisons of consumption, so we can look at consumption inequality. So it's not just one factor. We need to look at all of these factors together. Thank you.